I haven't gone live on YouTube in so long. I got really nervous. Well, I'm here with Kristen Legan. Christy was supposed to be here with me today, but Kristen got stuck. Or Christy got stuck. Her Tesla didn't charge.
Oh, geez. Oh, no.
Did you know that, Kristen?
No, I didn't. I knew her flight, so she was traveling and had some flight
Yeah.
issues, but oh, dang it.
So her
That's
flight got canceled yesterday. She landed in Kansas City and her Tesla wasn't charged. So she had enough charge to get it to the supercharger.
Oh.
But when she got there, because it's so cold, it was like an hour and a
geez.
half until they were it was gonna be ready. So okay, we do have some people joining us live. So if you're on YouTube and you can, please post in the chat maybe who you are and where you are joining us from, and maybe even what event you're doing this next year that you're interested in stuff for. So, and then if you are not familiar with Kristen Legan, she is the woman for the job today. So you've been doing Unbound for 10 years, or is this going to be your 11th?
Oh, geez. I mean, I haven't done it every single year, but my first year was 2013. So this will be like 12 years after the first year that I did it. But
yeah, Sherry doing the 100 from Chicago, and she's cold as well.
Yeah.
And your husband ended up this past year in the Hall of Fame. So y'all have a lot of ties to Unbound.
Yeah, we've been in gravel for a long time, and it's a lot of what we do in just our daily life, and spend a lot of time talking about it. So, yeah, I coach athletes for Unbound and other gravel races as well, and endurance mountain bike. So, yeah, it's a big part of what we do.
Yeah, and not to leave out the biggest thing, you also won the 350 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Well, coming up on 2 years ago, the big mud year. Super big adventure, and yeah, just something really cool and really proud about.
Yeah. And I was looking for some photos of you for the cover photo, and I was like, you're so clean at the finish line, because it was so rainy when you finished.
Yeah, it was funny because I mean, it was so the amount of mud I ate during that race, just from like shoving food in my mouth with mud all over my hands, was pretty disgusting. But yeah, it was nice. We got this like downpour the last 5 minutes or so going into the finish, so it was like nice little cleanup, and yeah, still looked terrible and disgusting, but a little bit less muddy.
Yeah. All right. We also have Taylor joining us from North Carolina, and she is doing Rebecca's Private Idaho, which is, have you done that one?
I have many years ago. I need to get back there because it is such a great race.
It's a great race, and it's a nice challenging course. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And really different too. It's nice when you can have different, flat and rolly gravel. And then Rebecca's has, a big old climb in it. And that's nice to change it up a little bit throughout the season.
yeah. So if you're joining us live and you're able to, go ahead, feel free to say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're from, what you're training for. I know some of you are probably on your phones and it's harder to do there. That's okay too. Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, Kristen, is you also have been coaching for Unbound for a long time. You wrote the training plans that are on the website. So you kind of know your stuff when it comes to coaching Unbound.
I've worked with a lot of different athletes on different levels and training for different distances. But yeah, I've worked with Unbound for the last, I think, 8 or 9 years, helping with a lot of their coaching programs and at the camp that they host each year, going out to Emporia and getting to work with people one-on-one there. So it's been great. And I just love this event. So excited to talk more about it.
Cool. Okay, we also have Philippa joining us. Sorry if I said your name wrong. I'm not even trying to say the gravel race you're doing, but she's freezing in upstate New York.
Yep.
And then Denise is doing the Unbound 50. Awesome.
Nice. Right on.
So, all right. Well, we're going to jump in. We had a lot of questions come in, and then we've got a 200 coming in from Arkansas, Jennifer. Nice. We've got a lot of questions that came in. Oh, everybody's answering now. Jesse doing the Unbound 100. Beth from Maine is doing that. Everybody's really cold.
I know. Everywhere it's just freezing right? Everywhere.
So if Kristen's suddenly gone, there's a blizzard and her power might go out. So everybody's really cold. So next time we're talking about indoor training, which will also be appropriate. Yep. But we wanted to just take a few minutes to talk a little bit about overview of training. So some folks maybe have trained for a lot of things, like you're really familiar with training processes, you followed training plans before. Maybe some of you are newer to training plans and the language around training plans. If you're doing Unbound or not, there are free training plans on the website that you can go find. And they're under I think it's like Garmin training or something. It's a little, you go to it through a couple of steps, but it's under training and it's like Garmin World's Training or something. And then you can download free training plans for every distance of the event. So I pulled up the 200 training plan that you can see here. And I wanted to talk about a few things with the plan. So if we look at the overall plan, Kristen, it starts with February. If you're going to jump into a training plan for an event, we're going to talk about a little bit of an overview, but what kind of base should you be trying to come into if you're doing something that's like maybe a reach distance for you, definitely 100 or a 200 mile event? What kind of base level fitness should you jump into a training plan with?
Yeah, I mean, I think just having a general like riding plan or consistency going already is always helpful going into a training plan because, if you're coming off the couch, you're going to need a little bit more time to kind of get up to speed, get some of your routines in order, and just get your body kind of used to the day-to-day training. So the more you can just almost have the plan, the consistency side of it, it doesn't even matter if you're doing 15 hours a week or 5 hours a week. It's just more about just having a kind of a routine kind of set for yourself. Because then once you get into the training plan, you're going to start adding in some extra stress from the actual workouts themselves. And so you don't want to necessarily be like learning, what days you can actually ride or how you feel doing 2 days in a row while you're adding in workouts to that. So I'd say, try and come in with a set, riding a couple days a week for a few weeks leading into that so that you can kind of ease into the workouts themselves a little bit more smoothly.
Yeah, it makes being in the saddle a whole lot more fun too.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, exactly.
For a while. And then again, this is just a look at the training plan for the 100, or this is the 200. There's every distance on there. So even if you're not doing Unbound, this is a nice training plan to follow. But walk us through how a training plan is laid out, like week to week, and just even the cycles of a training plan. And if you want me to change pages, I can, or I know it's not very big on the screen, so we can stay
Yeah,
here.
no, this is great. So yeah, I think, overall the training plan is just a big calendar. It's something that says, ride these days, take these days off. And so the idea with a lot of training plans and just training in general is to have this build process go. So you're going to start, a little bit easier. You're going to make things a little bit harder week by week. So that your body's able to adapt to it and you're able to kind of keep pushing a little bit harder or doing a little bit longer distances. But then the key to all of this is building in those rest weeks. So we can't just continue to build and build and build and build. Otherwise, we're going to likely either, overtrain ourselves or we're going to plateau because we're just not giving our bodies the rest it needs. And so that's probably the most important thing in training plans is having that regular rest week or rest block in there. But yeah, so as you can kind of see on this page, it's just built out day by day in the calendar, a couple of days a week of riding, a couple of days a week of resting. And then it goes into the more details of the types of workouts that you're doing. Are you just doing an easy, what we call a base ride, which is just kind of a conversational pace ride where you're just getting kind of that aerobic fitness in? Or are you doing something more specific that's a higher intensity workout that might be challenging you in different ways? There's tons of training plans out there. This is by far not the only one. There's lots of coaches who offer different training plans. And it really, for me, I think talking to athletes, it's about picking one and sticking to it. Is going to be your best bet rather than trying to find the perfect training plan out there. They're going to have, be better for certain people. And so it's just finding one that speaks to you and that seems to work, that the schedule works for you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. The secret really is consistency. And like you said, not skipping those rest weeks, even if you're like, I missed a few days, it's so tempting to just, I'll make it up during my rest week. And your recovery is really where your body is getting
Right.
stronger.
Right, exactly. When you skip, even if you skip a rest day, a day off, if you're like, oh, well, I didn't get this right in earlier this week, so I'm going to move it to my rest day. But then that just means the next workout that you do is going to suffer. And so you're kind of stealing the success of that workout by trying to squeeze too much in. So yeah, I'd say, like with these plans, they're really dynamic. You can mix and match. You don't have to take the Monday off and the Friday off. You could do a Tuesday off and a Saturday off, whatever works for you in your daily schedule, daily plan. But just making sure you're balancing it with enough of that rest.
And if you have weird jobs or weird, we get a lot of nurses or things like that,
Mhm.
where maybe you're working 12-hour days, so you can't get a training in. Like, are there certain workouts that are more important than others to look at in your week?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all tend to gravitate towards like, oh, if I have to get one workout in, I'm going to pick the hardest one because that seems like it's going to be the most efficient. And I'd say, in general, that's not a bad place to start, but we can't forget the base riding. Those longer rides, the endurance rides, especially for the types of events where we're going to be on the racing from 3 hours or to 27 hours, right? Having that just kind of baseline endurance is something that we all need. So it depends on kind of the time of the season and where you're at and maybe what your strengths and weaknesses are. But I'd say, it's yeah. So I didn't answer your question there. There is no one particular workout
Yeah.
that, you need to do. It just kind of depends on where you're at in the season.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay. I wanted to jump back a little bit. There's a page on this guide. It's called FTP and FT heart rate zones, functional threshold heart rate zones. I'm assuming that stands for.
Mhm.
And it has a bunch of zones on here. So I want to do, and again, a lot of people probably know what this is. If they've trained with like a Zwift or a Trainer Road or any other kind of training, they're probably familiar with this. But just for folks that may be new to training, can you explain what these things are and how you figure out what they are?
Yeah, exactly. So there's lots of ways to do that. The way that I like to work with athletes is doing a 20-minute threshold test or a functional threshold test. So it's something that you can do on your own. It's something you can do, indoors or outdoors. It depends on, what you have access to. But basically you want to do a nice big warm up, do some different efforts, get your body really primed like you would going into like a race. You want to be warmed up and ready to go. And then you do a 20-minute all-out effort, which is super fun to do, let me tell you.
So much.
um, but you want to do the hardest 20 minutes you can do, but the most consistently. So you don't want to go out sprinting and then just totally crater and, be barely pedaling your bike for the last, 15 minutes. You want to make it the most even, consistent, but hardest average effort for 20 minutes. And so whether you're using a power meter or you're using a heart rate monitor, you can use that to then find what was that average 20-minute power, or where did your heart rate even out on that 20 minutes. And that's where we start to use that information to break down the different zones. So, and those are training zones that you can use in those workouts that we were kind of looking at before. So taking, and it kind of talks you through these steps. You can take 95% of that 20-minute average, and that's going to give you a good indication of what your threshold is. And so based on that, that's what those percentages of those zones kind of break down into. But again, it's just a way to kind of think about how are we training different systems of our body or of our physiological systems, and using that to guide the training plan or, the workouts that we're doing.
Yeah. And if you're on one of the, like a Zwift or a Trainer Road or one of those programs, they will have an
Yeah.
FTP test workout that is in there. I don't train with power outside. I used to when I was in triathlon, but
Mhm.
I do like doing it inside, and then I kind of know how it feels
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah.
But if
I was going to say, the more you do, the more you're training with power, and especially if you can use heart rate too. Like ideally we're using all that, from my perspective as a coach, the more data we have, a lot of times the better, easier it is for the coach. But a lot of it comes down to that perceived feeling. And so, as great as it is to have a power meter or a heart rate monitor, you can still do this off of perceived effort. And so you can still kind of break it down into those different zones based on, a scale of 1 to 10, and kind of how hard are you working? So it's maybe not as accurate, but I think it's actually it's a good way to understand how your body's reacting to the workouts is by using that kind of perceived effort scale that's on this the training zones page.
Yeah. And a heart rate monitor for most people is pretty accessible. Like if you can't, you can get they're usually the really low end or I don't know, $30, but you can get, I think like the ones that people are finding work really well now are what's this, your arm, the arm straps.
Oh,
Came out with one. I was
mhm,
listening to a podcast with the guy that won Leadville, and he was talking about how
mhm.
much better the heart rate that you get
Yeah.
there is. It's like the one around your chest is sometimes hard for women. It feels a little squeezy.
Yeah, yeah, with all the different layers and the pressures there, it's nice to,
Yeah.
yeah, pull it off of your
And it's
chest for
always
sure.
good
I
to put
haven't
it
used
on.
one, but yeah, I think that would be a good call.
They're, much less investment than a power meter.
Yeah.
So if you don't have any of those things, like how could you figure out zones? Like, is there a way
So
to figure?
so yeah, if you see kind of the perceived effort column on that little breakdown there, it kind of gives you like on a scale of 1 to 10, what is the active recovery and again, this is going to be based on your feelings, but it's going to feel really easy, right? And under a 2 if you broke down kind of your full effort level. A sprint, something that you could do for between like 5 and 15 seconds, 15-20 seconds, that's going to be your kind of zone 6, 7 plus perceived effort. A lot of the training that we do, again, is going to be in that endurance zone. So like the lower end, 2 to 3 versus some of the workouts that you're going to do are going to be in that kind of threshold above 5. So it's again, not super accurate in terms of like having the exact, oh, I'm crossing over from a 3 to a 4 right now. But once you start getting into the training, you start understanding like I'm breathing really hard. My heart rate, I can feel my heart beating. That's when we're getting into kind of that threshold above 5 range.
Yeah. And I think, don't let anything like this stop you or freak you out. Like the most important thing is to get the miles in on your
Yeah.
bike. And
Yeah.
I hear people a lot asking, why am I not getting any faster? And some of it is just because you're training the same speed
Right.
all the time. And your easy days aren't easy enough and your hard days aren't hard enough is often why
Yeah.
you're not getting any faster on the bike. Okay, I'm going to take this off so we can face more. I'm going to pop over to our questions. So I have about 8 questions that came in. If you have questions as we're going that you want to drop in the chat, you can add those as well. But I'll start with some of ours that were happening. Okay, my first question, and I did these a little out of order of how I sent them to you, Kristen, but curious what the recommendations might be for base period. Oh, we kind of talked about this. And then also, how do you incorporate strength training and how far into your training should you do strength training? Like, should you do it the week of your event?
So again, okay, so I'm going to preface this entire talk on that. You're going to hear me say it depends a lot. It depends, and everybody is different. And I'm going to try and do my best to like make generalizations and say what's worked for me or for athletes that I've coached, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the perfect answer for everybody here. So just know that it's okay if you don't agree or feel the same way or haven't had the same experience as me. Like we're all different. We're all going to react to this a little bit differently. But my perspective is that weight training is really important for us as human beings and just as athletes as well. So I love incorporating strength training, mobility training into our cycling workouts or into our cycling plans because we spend so much time on the bike going in one direction and really repetitive motions. And so in order to prevent injuries and to make ourselves a little bit more dynamic as human beings and athletes it's nice to do stuff off of the bike. So right now we're in January still, kind of the base season, what we like to call base season right now. I think is a great time to be doing your strength training. I have athletes do strength all the way through the season. So we don't ever really stop for serious chunks of time unless it's like we're taking time off of training. So I still, it just depends on how much you're lifting and what types of lifts you're doing. And just making sure that we're building that into the training plan along with the workouts that they're doing. So right now is a great time to be really focused on strength because we're doing a lot of base training. We're doing a lot of more endurance side of things. We're not as worried about resting into a race right now. Not too many people are racing right now. So we can focus a little more on that strength. And again, I think lifting heavy weights is really important. It doesn't, we're already endurance athletes. We don't need to be endurance weightlifters either. So I think, higher weights, lower reps, and building a program around that is beneficial for us as endurance athletes.
Yeah, I think never underestimate the power of deadlifts to get you through some
Yes.
really hard
Yes.
parts,
Yeah.
right? Because when you're able to really recruit those muscles, as somebody
Mhm.
said they were doing Rebecca's Private Idaho, like, that thing is an 11-mile climb out the gate. And I was so not in shape when we showed up there because I had been at the tour,
Right.
like just had a crazy August. And the whole way up, I was like, thank God for deadlifts the whole way up
Yep.
that mountain. Then I turned around because I was like, and I'm done. But I made it up the 11-mile climb.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, I agree, and it doesn't have to be like you said, the doing the big lifts, but not as much volume because people are
Mhm.
like, I get too sore. Actually, after you start lifting, it's like doing lots of reps that makes you sore,
Mhm.
not like 5 sets or 5 reps of the squat
Yeah.
or
And it's okay to get sore. I think it's your body starts to adapt. And so, if you're getting sore after every single time you lift, then I'd say maybe you're trying to do too much, whether on the bike or in the gym. And so finding a little bit better balance in that. But that's part of getting stronger is kind of pushing ourselves in those ways. So it's okay if you're pushing hard on strength training, as long as we're not just like totally abandoning what we're doing on the bike as well.
Another thing I would just say is don't just do your legs, like, you want a strong upper body too,
Yeah.
like, that bench press or push up for, like, holding yourself in that position,
Mhm.
and then, rows to kinda open your body up since you're doing
Yeah.
so much
Yeah,
forward
exactly.
positioning.
Yeah, we do a lot of hunching when we're, working at our desk or on the bike or hunching. So a lot of stuff that can open you up that way,
Yeah,
is really helpful.
and then you might not wanna strength train the week of Unbound.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess, yeah, in terms of, the weeks of so I think, again, it's kind of like a training plan, right? You're going to have some phases of build where you're going to be building the weight, or you're pushing harder on the weight, and then you're going to have your rest weeks from that, so that you're letting your body recover from it. But same thing, tapering into a race. When you taper on the bike, you're reducing the intensity, you're reducing the volume, so let your body like really recover. Same kind of thing for the lifting. I still like to do mobility or some like openers,
Yeah.
lifting the week of like a big race, but it doesn't mean I'm going to go deadlift, 150 pounds or something like that. It's more like just doing some active like glute activations and that kind of thing. So it's about kind of again finding the right balance of the training plan, so that you're not overdoing it the race week.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We've got some questions coming in. I am starring those, so I get back to them. I'm gonna do a few more on the sheet. I kinda grouped them by topics. So,
Mhm.
um, when to take recovery weeks and how big should your big weeks be? This is for somebody that's trying to go for performance. They're hoping to get a
Mhm.
top 30 finish.
Yeah, huge actually. That was a really great question. For somebody who's really going for it this year. So in general, I'd say, when to take recovery weeks. I like having a plan in place, whether it's, typically when I work with athletes, it's doing a 4-week block. And so it's doing 3 weeks of kind of building the training and then having that one recovery week. It's not for everybody. I think we might talk about this a little bit later. There's some other ways to go about that kind of cycle of training, but I do like that pattern quite a bit, the 3 weeks on, 1 week of recovery. It works for a lot of people. And then it's having a set routine like that kind of forces you to take the recovery week, because if you set it and you're like, well, I'm just going to do it when I feel tired. A lot of us kind of push through when we're tired, and then you end up never taking one. So I think like putting it on your calendar of saying, nope, no matter what, I'm going to recover this week. it kind of holds you accountable to it. So that's one way to do it. But then also just if you need to make it sooner, like there are signs when you need that recovery. There's some pretty obvious signs. For me, it's a lot of mood changes. I get really snappy or like cranky about things. And as soon as I start catching myself doing that, I'm like, oh, training's been going really well. Maybe I need a couple days off, or I need to like get my recovery week coming in a little bit earlier. Or if like I'm really avoiding getting on the bike, like I love riding bikes. So as soon as I don't want to ride my bike, I know there's something like, okay, I'm pushing the limits here. So there's some like mood or like emotional side of it that we can kind of focus on as signs that we need some recovery. But then also like the physiological side of it, we can see when your heart rate is not doing what it normally does. When you're, whether your resting heart rate is elevated by, more than a few beats each day, that's a good sign that you're hitting that point where you need to start building in more recovery. If you use HRV, any kind of device that covers or tracks that, you can kind of see when that starts to really trend down and it's not bouncing back up. That's another place where you're probably overdoing it a little bit and need some rest.
Your sleep's really bad.
Yeah, exactly. Like all of that, unless you're, unless there's something else going on in life where like, okay, you went out drinking that night or something and you didn't sleep well, then that's probably your answer.
Kind of recovery.
Right. That might be it. Might not be your training. But if you're in a good routine of things and you have a good pattern of what's going on in your life and you're seeing your heart rate changes, your sleep changes, those are signs like that you can catch early and say, great, I'm going to take a couple days easy, or I'm going to move my rest week up a little bit and take it now so that I can then come back and train harder once I'm recovered.
Awesome. Okay, let me see. Okay, what's the balance? We've covered this a little between endurance riding, long and slow, and high intensity. And then I use my Garmin and it's telling me my load focus is low aerobic and that I should consider more anaerobic work. Also, I was like, is your Garmin full of shit?
I mean,
my interpretation of that question.
Yeah. I mean, I love Garmin.
We took our Aura rings. We're like, our Aura rings are like, you are not.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, F you, Aura ring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the best is when Garmin tells you're being unproductive after you just did like some huge ride and you're just like, really? Come on, man. No, I think Garmin's great. I think it gives you a lot of cool data and recommendations, but it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect, right? So it doesn't know everything that you're doing in life. And same thing for like some of the training programs that we use, like Training Peaks I use. It like those numbers don't take into account everything that's going on in life. So you have to take a step back and see it from a bigger perspective. But I will say that a lot of people, especially newer athletes coming into gravel and especially coming into long gravel, they think that because we have these big miles to accomplish in the race, that's what I need to be focused on in training. And while the endurance ride or like doing a longer ride each week is important, we need to like get the volume up there because we need to know how our body's going to feel after 6 hours on the bike. Our hand's going to go numb. Is our back going to hurt? Those types of things. It's important to get that endurance training in. But I really do believe in having that higher intensity workout to balance that out. So for a lot of us who work during, work 9 to 5 or 5 days a week kind of thing, having those shorter, more intense workouts a couple of times during the weekdays is a really good way to balance out that maybe longer weekend ride that you could get. But I do think that that's probably where most people could improve their training in the most efficient way, is by just adding in a little bit more intensity. And I'm, there's a lot of philosophies out there. I think, you can go down many rabbit holes on pyramidal training, a lot of, just a bunch of polarized, all these different things. But really it's about just keeping yourself dynamic and just doing things different. So it's not day after day of the same type of training.
Yeah. I will say I had so much success last year, and this is like an N of 1, right? But I had to do a lot. Like it was a very busy year with work. I did a couple of big events with some people at my gym, and then a couple of big gravel events. And I did a lot of at the gym on the Concept 2
Mhm.
bike, which is set up like a bike, right? But it's not like a trainer bike.
Yeah.
30 seconds on, 30 seconds off for like a
Mhm.
round of 4, and then 4 minutes off, and then another like, or then I would do a round of 5 and round. I got I saw a lot of gain in my fitness from doing
Yeah.
that once a week, which was,
Yeah.
and I would just change the pattern every week. And it was so
Yeah.
simple. Like, and it sucked. It absolutely sucked. But
Yeah. But in
30
a good
seconds
way,
really hard
right?
and 30 seconds easy, like for 4 minutes, try that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I think my if I had to pick one workout for people to do, like go out and try, it's a workout called 40-20s. And it's, I think every coach probably out there gives athletes these workouts because it's just a really efficient way to train. It's going 40 seconds of hard, kind of into your zone 4, your threshold, up into, high zone 4. So 40 seconds of like pretty full gas and then 20 seconds recovery, and trying to do that and maintain the effort across, like let's say 8 rounds of that it's tough. It's a really tough workout, but it's manageable, it's doable. It's not going to leave you just totally shattered and not able to ride your bike for 5 days afterwards, but it's so different than what we normally do when we just go out and ride. Even if like we're riding with faster people, it's a lot of those rides are just really long, consistent rides. We don't spend a lot of time going like on, off, unless you're a crit racer. So, that's a great one. If you're looking for one workout to try in the next few weeks, try that one.
Yeah. Okay. This is somebody, I know that a lot of our people have this. They are somewhere, we've seen that from this group. They're somewhere where they don't get to bike outside a lot because they spend, it's cold, and they spend a
Mhm.
lot of the winter cross country skiing. How much indoor riding do I need? And she strength trains 3 times a week, runs once, and skis
A
around
lot.
12 hours every week. Whoa.
Yeah.
With 2 long days on the weekend. So she's getting a lot of endurance, but how much specific bike is she gonna need?
Yeah, this is awesome. I wanna talk to this person who had like the skiing. I think, cross country skiing, any kind of skiing is just like such an incredible workout. So this person is certainly getting a lot of aerobic work, right? Like they have that endurance aspect kind of covered. The big question is then how does that translate over into bike fitness? And I think, overall it does really well. One You guys should have, Sarah Lang on the podcast if you
Oh,
haven't
yeah.
already.
Yeah,
I
we've
would
had her
love
on.
to. Oh, you have? Oh, I haven't heard it. I need to, yeah, need to listen to that. But I know she does a lot of cross country skiing throughout the season and then
Yeah.
comes and just
Well,
like
so does Heather
dominates it.
Jackson in
Yeah,
the winter.
exactly. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so anyhow, these can be used as tools, and I think they're really great tools. But there is that kind of muscle memory or just specific muscle usage from being on the bike. So it is good to then work in at least a little bit of biking throughout the season. So for this person, I was thinking, for January and February, if you get on the bike twice a week, even just for like an hour to spin out the legs, spin out some of the skiing that you've built up, the fatigue from, I think that's good just to kind of keep your body moving and being in that position so that when throughout later in the season, when you get back on the saddle, you're not just starting from scratch. So get a couple days in a week if you can. That's great. As we get to March and certainly to April, that's when I would say starting to refocus the priorities. If you're targeting Unbound, which is at the end of May, I think that kind of like mid-March to mid-April range is a good time to really start say, okay, maybe I'm going to ski one less day a week and add in another bike, or I'm going to, just try and prioritize getting a little bit longer bike rides in as the weather's changing to get a little bit warmer. So it kind of depends on your priorities. Like if you're a ski racer and that's your first priority, then obviously make that the thing that you're shooting for and use the bike as supplementary, and then change once the snow's not falling anymore. But if Unbound is a big goal for you, I'd say, you should be starting to make that bike your priority by, April time period.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, like there's probably some people that are doing running. Like I've been doing a lot of run
Mhm.
training over the winter as well. And
Yeah.
again, there's a balance of that fitness. And also like whenever I get back on the bike, I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta get used to
Yeah.
the positions, the saddle, the eat, like all the things
Yeah.
that just takes longer to get comfortable there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
less about the training and more just about like the feeling of being on the bike, in some of that.
Yeah. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about at the beginning, because I do think, especially if people are newer to training, like, you don't need as much training as you think you do. And the more training you get, the more fun it's going to be. And the more you're going to see performance on the day. But I would say don't freak out if you're not doing as much as you think. Like, I took a bunch of
Right.
newbies. Most of them had just gotten bikes in February. We did Seattle to Portland. The longest
Mhm.
ride anybody did was 70 miles. That's a 200-mile
Yeah.
ride. Now it's spread over 2 days. And like one 70-mile ride.
Mhm.
Was it the fastest? No. Would I have liked to have gone faster with like more training? Yes. But everybody finished, everybody was happy, right? So like there is a part where don't freak out if you're not getting as much training as you think you
Yeah.
should.
Yeah. Stay off of social media and watching what the pros do, because it is, I mean, it just
They're trying to win.
blows your, yeah, it's horrible where you're just like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not training 30 hours a week. I'm not gonna be able to finish this." And it's like, "Yes, you are. It's okay."
Yeah.
But no, I do think that especially as women, we like to typically we like to overdo it, right? We want to over prepare for something because we just don't want to make a mistake out there. And so I think we get really nervous that we're not doing enough and like have that kind of mentality of it. But I will say, yeah, I think we don't have to do as much as we think we do in terms of volume. But again, it comes down to everybody's different, and what are your goals for the race? Do you want to go win Unbound? Okay, that's going to change the goal from or the amount of training you're going to need to do than somebody who's going out there to have a good time, finish strong, and not just suffer the whole time. So it really depends on what is your goal and what's your history, and how much can you rely on that. But
Yeah.
yeah, that
When you started last year, you had some major like you had to have surgery. Was that right?
Mhm.
Last year to start the year?
Yeah,
Like you didn't get to start your training till much later.
yeah, exactly. And
And I
yeah,
know you
so
didn't have a great day because of like other issues that happened that weren't related to your
right.
training.
Yeah. But so I'd say, like, for me personally as a like pretend elite athlete, that I train a lot less than a lot of the top elite athletes do. And part of that is because I work, full-time jobs and all these other different things. So I don't have the time to do it, but I also have a huge background in riding. And so that comes into play. So somebody who's brand new to cycling and wants to come and do 100 miles or 200 miles, let's say, like, you might need to train, having that endurance training is going to be more important than maybe somebody who's, been doing 200-mile races for 10 and a half, 10 years. So that's going to play into like that, there's always the question of how much do I need to train versus, again, like, it just depends. So I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer, but I will say that, when I work with athletes, I typically break them into three different groups, and it's based on how many hours per week can you train. And so we build your goals based around that. And one, like, kind of the lower end of that is around 8 hours a week on average. And I feel like that's a pretty manageable thing to shoot for. And this is for people racing the 100 or the 200-mile races at Unbound.
Yeah.
So 8 hours a week, if you think about that, that's, a couple of times during the work week, whether it's an hour, hour and a half, somewhere in there, and then getting a longer ride in on the weekend. And you can sometimes split that into two rides on the weekend. It just depends on how many days per week can you ride. And maybe you need to load one day up for that kind of longer endurance ride. But on average, that kind of 8 hour, that means some weeks are going to be a little bit more than 8 hours and some weeks are going to be less than that 8 hours. But that's where I've seen, like, plenty of athletes have huge success out at Unbound, finish strong, finish 200 miles, finish 100 miles, feeling really good on that kind of balance of 8 hours a week.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to take one more from our document, and then I'm going to go to some from the chat, and then we'll go back to the document. But somebody was saying they are having trouble getting their heart rate up on trainer rides. Any advice? Do the 30-30s.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, my first thought is anytime somebody says that they can't get their heart rate up, it's usually a sign of you're really tired. Like your heart rate's not responding, right? It's not responding quickly. So that would be my first question. Is this a factor of like you're overdoing it and you're just like you're training really hard and now you can't get your heart rate up? So if that's the case, I'd say rest, and then you'll probably see that heart rate spike a little bit faster. If not, then yeah, I'd say like figuring out the different types of rides that you're doing. And you can play with some different things, whether it's effort, trying to do shorter, more intense efforts, which again, I think a lot of people lack in their training plans. So doing some of those short 30-30s or 40-20s. The other thing is you can play around with cadence. You can do some different things that maybe are a little bit less on the intense side of things, but they're just trying to work your cardiovascular system a little bit more, and it's going to rely less on your musculature. It's going to be more on kind of that overall speed of things. So those were the couple of the questions I had. But again, most of the time when our heart rate isn't coming up, it's because we're too tired. So try and rest a little bit more.
Yeah. And it can also depend on what kind of trainer you're using. Like if you are using a smart trainer, or if you're using, I always say it wrong, an erg mode or not. Like sometimes if I'm on Zwift and I'm on the flats, I'm like trying to get above like 60 some watts. Like I have to go to a or something. It's just because I typically am doing some kind of workout if I'm on Zwift.
Yeah, that's a great call, because sometimes like in erg mode, that's where the trainer is going to control the resistance for you, and so that you're not really shifting. And it's like you upload a workout and it's saying, okay, you're going to be at 100 watts right now, and it's going to change the resistance to force you to ride at 100 watts. And how that does it, it's based on resistance in your cadence. So if you're in erg mode and maybe your workout that the trainer is giving you is just too low for you, then that's another way that your heart rate wouldn't be able to come up, because you can't go hard enough. So take it off of erg mode and see if you can make it a little bit harder for yourself. So yeah, that's a good technical possibility.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question from Sherry. She is traveling to see, I think this is common. Somebody's going to be traveling for work and they can't ride. Maybe they're, like Sea Otter. If you've been to Sea Otter, you're just standing on your feet and working all day too.
Yeah.
What do you do to not lose fitness if you're on a work trip, if you're really busy? Like if you what do you do, Kristen? You do a lot of work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the good news is that we don't lose fitness as fast as we think we do. So even if you're off the bike completely, you're not running, you're not doing a lot of like physical, training on these work weeks or weeks off. It's not like you're just like losing weeks and weeks and weeks of all of the work you've done. You're going to come back. Your FTP is going to be the same. You haven't lost muscle strength, that kind of thing. The one thing that I'd say that we lose during that time off is the kind of the neuromuscular connection, or like the feeling of riding. So that first day back, once we're back from that trip, we get on the bike and we just feel terrible. And we're like, oh, I lost it all. I feel terrible. I'm not as fit. I'm not as strong as I was. It's not. It's just that you don't feel good. So I would bet your power's fine. I bet if you did a workout that day, you'd be able to nail the numbers, that kind of thing. It's just that you don't feel good. And so that's where, just give yourself a few days, stick to the plan, and you'll feel better once you kind of get that connection back. But so I'd say, for something like this, I would coach an athlete to say, like, just relax. It's okay if you're not going to be able to train out there. It's going to actually probably be a good mental break for you. This time, Sea Otter is a great time of the season where we've been training really hard. You've put in a lot of effort, and it might be getting a little bit stale. And so taking a week off and a week off away from the bike is going to give you a lot more like mental break, so that you come back and you're feeling stronger. So use it as that kind of break or that reset, and use it that way, rather than trying to like go to the gym or, find a gym and get on a stationary bike and, add all this extra stress and trying to do things that it's not really worth it. It's just going to make you more stressed. So just let it go. It's okay to miss a week of training. Just get back into it and do your best to stick to the plan from there. I will say Sea Otter has a great demo program out there. So if you could go like sneak in a quick hour, that's a fun way to do it. But again, like if it's going to add more stress, if it's going to make it harder, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Go borrow somebody's awesome bike and ride a little bit around.
Yeah.
Okay. Jessie Adventures. I like that name. She lives in Florida and there aren't many hills. Tips for training.
Yeah. This is a hard one. It's hard. I've coached an athlete for Leadville before who lived in Florida, and that was a huge challenge for us because especially for a Leadville where it's like straight up or straight down, there is no there is a flat, but the key parts are climbing. So thankfully Florida is also known for its wind. Florida has a lot of wind, and so you can kind of use the wind, use the elements that you have in order to help replicate some of the other elements you might face in the race. So like wind is a great one for hills because it kind of gives you that same resistance, that same like you're pushing against something and you have to dig a little bit deeper just to keep the cadence up. So I'd say, don't, embrace the elements that you have in order to train what you don't have. And again, like that's where a lot of the intervals, the different, dynamic, like different intensity levels, I think can help mimic the hills as well. So
Yeah,
like,
like you should do big gear intervals then.
yeah. Yeah, I do some big gear. That I'm a little hesitant because I think that can trigger some people's knees a little bit to fire up doing big gear stuff if you're not used to it. So definitely want to like ease into that side of things. But yeah, just changing up your cadence so that you're kind of mimicking, what it is to grind up a hill. Or, the surfaces. Can you find something
Find
that's,
some sand.
yeah, yeah,
You
exactly.
feel like you're going up a hill immediately.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So again, like find those elements that you can build in that kind of mimic it. But again, like it's about going into these races as strong and as kind of resilient as possible. And you're going to be able to adapt to those situations. So as long as you're doing the work ahead of time to give yourself that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think like that's where your strength training, like getting those deadlifts,
Mhm.
those
Yeah.
lunges or squats in will actually really, you'll have the power when you get to the hills,
Mhm.
that little extra kick. So,
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's a great call.
hey, so people, oh shoot, I made the screen too big. I can't see you. uh, uh, okay, I'm going to go back to the sheet, but if anybody has any other questions, they can drop them into the chat onto the side. These are great questions. Okay, we are on to hormones. I did get some scoop from Celine on some of these. So, Kristen, you have also worked with lots of menopausal athletes,
Mhm.
so I might have some rando things. But most plans are 3 weeks hard, then a week rest. But as a postmenopausal athlete, I found 2 weeks hard, then a rest week works best for me. How do I adjust a training plan to accommodate that?
Yep. No, I love this question because it's actually I've worked with several athletes on this kind of exact same thing. So I had one athlete who came to me who already kind of knew that this plan worked for her for doing like the 2 weeks on, 1 week off. And so we've incorporated that into just the overall training plan. And then I had another athlete who was just struggling to really recover on the recovery weeks. Even no matter how easy we were making them, however, like extending the recovery, she just wasn't feeling great by the end of the week. And so that's where it was like, okay, extra rest isn't digging us out of this hole that we've already built. So what we need to do is make that hole a little bit shallower. So by making it 2 weeks instead of 3 weeks of that build process. So if you take like, any training plan out there that might be set in that 4-week block kind of idea, then what I like to do is, it's just start adding in the rest weeks, a week early. And you have to then, manipulate it a little bit because you have to take like that third build week and push it down a little bit so that you're not just moving through the training plan too quickly. So you have to kind of extend the different phases of the training. So like, sorry, this is a little confusing, but in general, let's say you have a 3 block, so 3 blocks of 4 weeks of base training that you're doing. So somebody who wants to then change that to 2 weeks on, 1 week off, a 3-week block, then you just have to add in those extra rest weeks while still spreading out the build throughout there. Sorry, I need a whiteboard right now
I
to
know
kind of,
it's a little confusing, but basically it's like you're doing the 2 weeks of hard work and then
yeah,
you're adding and a rest week doesn't mean you don't do anything.
right.
You're just
Yeah.
looking at what that rest week is and kind of mimicking that
Yeah,
type
exactly.
thing.
Yeah, find what kind of like how much rest works for you. And that's another like really personal question. Some athletes, we build their rest weeks where they take the first 3 days of that rest week completely off. They don't even touch their bike for 3 days. Some athletes, it's more about just minimizing the work that they're doing because actually being on the bike and doing active recovery is more beneficial for them. So it depends on who you are and how you respond to that kind of rest. But yeah, for the idea is that you use 2 build weeks from the training plan and then do a rest week and then do 2 more build weeks and then a rest week. And it's remember that none of this is like magical, right? Like there is no perfect training plan. There is no perfect routine for everybody out there. So it's really about piecing together the things that work for you and just making sure you're getting enough variety in that plan.
Yeah. I'm 49. I'm turning 50 in a few weeks.
Yeah.
And I started doing a 3-1, like 3 days on, 1 day off, which is weird because like it messes up your weeks and you have to adjust it. So, but I have a lot of flexibility because I work from home, like or I don't have kid, like I
Mhm.
have a lot of freedom in my schedule and I'm actually finding it's working quite well. Because I'm also like Olympic lifting at the same time
Mhm.
that I'm doing a lot of running and biking. Um, but it's like, you just have to be willing to experiment,
Mhm.
a little bit, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"If this doesn't work, I'll go back to, like, a normal like, what I was doing normally with my training weeks," but
Yeah.
I have an Aura ring, so I'm able to track a lot, and I see,
Yeah.
like, when I get to that 3rd day, it's like, "Oh, my body really actually does need the rest."
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, just pay attention, the more that we can kinda just, like, listen to what we're feeling, I think it's a really good guide, and, like, how hungry are you? Are you craving different things? It's all part of this, like, our body's giving us a lot of feedback. So, use all of that information, and it helps guide us a little bit better on where to rest, where to push, and, what time to do that.
Yeah. Okay, this one's a little complicated, so I'm gonna pull out the part that I think that works for everybody. So this is a question from a woman named Emily, and, so she had an injection of something called Lupron Depot for endometriosis pain, and it puts her into a similar state as menopause.
Mhm.
And then this is the part I asked Celine about because she was
Okay.
having some struggles with like lots of menopause symptoms. And Celine's like, this injection will really mess with you. And it's going to make your hormones crazy for a little bit. And you just need to like listen to your body
Mhm.
and be okay with that. And so, Emily, if you want to reach out to me, I can connect you with Celine if you want some more detailed stuff on this. But she's, I think what is more broad for our audience is what do you do with fluctuating hormones and like the things that come along with that? Like, especially if you're entering perimenopause, but I also think like regularly cycling women, like our hormones
Mhm.
really mess with us. So like,
Yeah.
what do you do about hormones, Kristen?
Well, I mean, they mess with us or they can make us like superheroes, right? Like
Yeah.
there's positive side to it all. I'm gonna definitely say like there are some great experts out here. If you're not listening to the Celine's podcast, like please do. It's so helpful for whatever stage of life you're in, and just knowing like what you're going through is not abnormal. It's like other people are going through that as well. So in general, I'll give general thoughts, but I think, certainly go to the experts who know this super well. But using your hormones, like we're all going through different phases or in the month or in our lives, and so using the hormone fluctuations to our advantage, somebody who hasn't reached menopause or perimenopause yet is going to have different fluctuations, and so there's a lot of different ways out there to track that, and you can actually use that to your advantage and like build your training plans around that. I've worked with a couple athletes doing that to really maximize like when are they feeling strongest, when can they recover the best, and we're going to load up that time with the workouts that we can really push on. And then there's going to be the downside on that. Like there's going to be times where they're going to need more recovery, where they feel like crap, where they just need like to not sit on a bike for a day or two, and we'll build that into the plan as well. But everybody's different, and it doesn't matter, who you are. Like, you have to just do the work to figure out what is your cycle, where are you at in your phases in life, and how are those different hormonal changes affecting your day-to-day life, your mood, your strength, your recovery. So it comes down to tracking it and then being able to then manipulate your training based on where you're at and what you're feeling.
Yeah.
So,
And I think with the perimenopause stuff, especially, like, it's legit. You're not making it up. You're not
right.
being a wimp.
Right.
Listen to your body and like, you'll be okay. Like what we were saying earlier, like you can actually do a good bit less training than you think you can
Yeah.
to get to the finish line. And so just like be nice to yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And I do think like with that, another part of this was a bit around weight gain. And we're going to have a specific 2 podcasts that are very focused on nutrition, but always, always, always fuel your workouts. Like that is not the place to cut back. Like if you're working on some body composition goals or you're seeing weight gain with perimenopause or something like that, it's not going to serve you. Like it's actually going to backfire on you if you aren't fueling your workouts, because then your body's just going to demand it somewhere else. So it's going to be like, I am in desperate need of food later.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Yep.
Anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
we will get
we
way more into fueling in the future, but I don't know if you have any initial thoughts on that, Kristen.
Yeah, I think, just as exactly what you're saying, like fueling, we're doing incredible things, right? Like just day to day, but going out on our bikes and doing these workouts, this kind of stuff, like we have to fuel it, because it's the same thing as recovery. Like you can push so hard, but at some point you're going to have to pay for it. And so you have to recover, or you have to fuel for it. I'm sure we've all gone out on a bike ride, forgotten our food or forgotten to eat or drink along the way. And then we get home and it's like, oh, wow, that bag of potato chips sounds really good. And we end up eating the whole thing. I know I have done that. So it's not that, your body's going to crave it one way or another, and we're going to have to fuel it. Otherwise you're going to, sacrifice it in a different way, whether that's you're going to burn out, you're going to, really just struggle to recover. And you're not going to be able to execute your next workout. So, yeah, I'm glad you guys are doing some very specific nutrition, because that's a huge part of not only training, but also racing at Unbound. So figuring that component out of it is really important.
Yeah. And I would say like every ride, for the most part, like you should be fueling in some way.
Yeah.
Like it's just going to help you. It's going to help you recover. If you're training a lot, even if you're like, that's just a 1-hour ride, fueling during your ride is going to help you recover for your next thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and like, it's not like that's the only ride you've done that week, I bet, right? Like there are other rides and other things you're doing that you have to just the more stable you can keep yourself across the board, it's going to allow you to train harder, recover better.
Okay. We have a couple of questions that are a little outside the scope. So this podcast is all about training. So I'm going to kind of summarize a couple, but if anybody has any other questions that you're dying to hear, drop them in the chat. Before we get to those questions though, Kristen, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about Unbound Camp, because you are one of the main coaches at Unbound Camp. Christy, who's not here because she's locked out of her Tesla, and I are going to be there. And so I know we've had a couple of women say that they're interested in Unbound Camp, but could you, like, from your perspective, as somebody that's coached it for a long time, like, what's the value of Unbound Camp?
Yeah, no, Unbound Camp's one of my favorite weeks of the year. It's just nice because you're surrounded by people who are all kind of working towards the same goal in a lot of ways. And so it's just like the stoke is super high. So it's a great way just to kind of like get reinvigorated at that time of the year. It's in end of March, early April each year. And so it's a good time where it's like you've done a lot of training and, you've been pushing it really hard, and now you get to go kind of like be part of a community and enjoy it. So that aspect of it is really neat. It's just being surrounded by a lot of people with that same goal. But then there's a ton of great coaches that show up with that everybody has their own experiences out at Unbound or at long gravel events and training for it. So you get to pick the brains of lots of people who've done this stuff for a long, long time. And, again, like my perspective is really different than somebody else's, and you might connect with that person a little bit better, or have had that same kind of, experience, and you can learn from them. So having that kind of broader group of people to pull from. Um, and then honestly, like just getting time on Emporio's gravel is huge. A lot of us, I live in Colorado, we have nice, smooth dirt roads a lot of the time. So going to Unbound is always kind of a shock to the body, right? Where you're just like going across some of these like rugged roads, and you're just like, oh yeah, this is what it feels like. And I need to ride a little bit differently, like approach corners differently, because they're going to be a little bit looser. They're going to have more gravel, like ruts in them. So it's great just to get to experience the roads and the type of terrain that you're going to be racing on in a few months. And it's just nice to get a big weekend of training. You get some big rides in that are supported, and it's a good way to, get some miles in.
Cool. And then one of the things that I've gotten a few questions about is some people being afraid they're not fast enough for the camp.
No, I mean, it depends on, like everybody I think is welcome. We do try and keep it to like a 8 to 10 mile an hour average speed for some of the for the rides. But again, like there's a lot of ways we can change the courses a little bit. We can get out there. We have so many coaches that you're not going to be alone out there. We're not going to like just be like, see you later and drop you.
By yourself.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's a lot of support. And I would, again, just say like, we often underestimate what we can do and how fast we are. And we always, a lot of us always think like, I'm going to be too slow, or I'm going to hold up the group, or people are going to get annoyed with me because I can't keep up with them. And that's not the case at all. Like this camp is about getting everybody the experience out there and understanding what it's like to be at Unbound. And it's just a super, super supportive, positive experience. So I'd say like sign up, just go for it. Don't overthink it. Just come have fun.
Okay, I'm going to run through a couple of these technical questions really fast. If anybody has any other training questions, feel free to drop them in, and we'll be wrapping up in a few minutes. But we got mud. Okay, so we can't control what's going to happen, right? But is there a way to help train for mud and also for some of the technical stuff that you might encounter, like if you're nervous about that and you aren't living in a place where you have some of those things?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mud happens where we may experience it. We may not. It just depends on the year. But I think, first and foremost, like just being really prepared for it. Like thinking about what tires you're going to run. Does your bike have clearance to clear some of that mud as you're doing that? It's helpful that way. So, but also then like when we're actually out in that experience of there's mud out there, then it's about anticipating the mud. So you can watch people ahead of you. You can watch the lines in the road ahead of you. And if you see those lines starting to get really squiggly, and then all of a sudden the bike track stops, it's probably because somebody had to get off their bike and walk, or if you see people ahead of you walking, it's a good sign. I need to get off my bike and walk, because if they're walking, the likelihood that you're going to be able to ride through this mud is just not gonna, it's pretty low. So then once you're off your bike, you're walking, then it's about efficiency, right? Like, and I think this question, they mentioned that in 2023, when it was super muddy, they weren't able to make the first checkpoint because the mud held them up too much. So then it's about like getting through the mud efficiently. And what I like to think about is like, you're going to be walking, don't try and like clean your bike off, walk a little bit, try and ride again, then you're gonna have to clean your bike off, and going through that. Like we talk a lot about having a final fix. And so like for mud, wait until you get to that point where you can ride again, clean off your bike, do a really good job so that you don't have to stop again and clean it off in 5 seconds. Clean it off and then start pedaling again. So don't just like keep going back and forth of like, oh, I'm going to try and ride, or I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to clean my bike, and then I'm going to try and ride again. And so walk where you need to, and then once you're through it, clean off your bike and get going. So that's where I see a lot of people stopping and cleaning their bikes 15 times in the middle of the mud. And you're like, well, just clean it
Yeah.
once once you're done. So
It's where the upper body strength comes in too. When you pick your
yeah,
bike.
exactly. Or like, again, like just look around, like use what you have. If there's a grassy section, maybe it's not rideable because it's still muddy, but it's going to collect less on your bike. And so if you can push your bike through that versus trying to push it through the mud, then you're going to get through it a little bit faster. But I'd say like biggest thing is just be calm, collected, like take a deep breath and think your way through it a little bit. See where it makes most sense to kind of put your bike in where.
Cool. Yeah, and we'll go more into some of these technical pieces. I think we've got some of that on the schedule for maybe March. Okay, so we're just gonna go, what did you tires and wheels? I think we're gonna get this question every week. So
Yeah.
we are gonna do a
Tires.
whole gear podcast, but we'll get your opinion, Kristen, because you are a 10-year veteran.
Yeah. Well, wheels, I mean, I think wheels are kind of a personal choice. It's what a lot of us, it's what we have and what we're training. More aerodynamic wheels are great if you're trying to go fast. But then like the weight versus aero factor is always a question. And then also the wind, the deeper section wheels, the harder it is to control your bike in side winds. So just keep that in mind when you're selecting your wheels. But the bigger question, I think, is tires, right? Like, what tires should I run at Unbound? It's probably the most asked question of all time. But for me, I think bigger tires, the better, and it's a balance of what fits in your bike, what the clearance is for your bike so that you're not rubbing the tire against your frame. And that also leaves a little bit of room for the possibility of mud. Exactly. But I would say like the biggest tire that you can fit into your bike with a comfortable amount of clearance is the best way to go. There's studies being done that show like wider tires are faster. They're gonna roll over things faster. They're gonna absorb the chunk of the gravel better than like a narrower tire. So bigger that you can do, the better. And then in terms of tread, it just comes down to your kind of preference or your relationship with your technical ability on it. So if you're like a awesome technical handler, how to ride really loose stuff, then like you can go with a little bit less tread on your tire. And it's going to maybe be a little bit faster. You're going to get through the, on the soft or on the smoother terrain, you're going to be a little bit faster on that, but you might have to watch out the corners a little bit, that kind of thing. But if you're somebody who's like, I want to go out, I want to have a good time, I don't want to deal with punctures, I want to, feel secure, safe out while I'm riding, add a little bit of tread, add a little bit of puncture protection in those types of tires is going to be, saving a few, a little bit of time by having a faster but lighter tire that punctures easily is not worth it if you're going to have to stop for 10 15 minutes fixing a flat. So hopefully it doesn't take us 10 or 15 minutes, but some of us it does. So so I'd say the bigger the better, and then anything that just feels really like has some good puncture resistance is going to be good.
Awesome. Well, I think we're at the end of our questions for today. Is there anything that you feel like is important or that you want to leave people with, Kristen?
I think the biggest thing for me with training for Unbound is just don't stress it. Like ride your bike, get some good workouts in, and do different types of workouts. And you're going to probably be great out there. Don't overthink it. Don't make it too complicated, and just be gentle, be kind to yourself. You're going to miss some workouts. It's okay. We all miss workouts. You're going to maybe not execute it perfectly. It's okay. We don't all, hit every single workout. Just make sure you're doing varied types of training and be consistent with your riding, and you're going to have a great day out there.
Yeah. And if you want more fun, you and your husband have a podcast called Funbound.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
So tell us about that podcast and where they can find it.
Yeah, so you can find it on all the streaming, all the different ways you find podcasts these days. It's called the Funbound Podcast, and yeah, we just interview different guests, everything from people who can tell stories about the first Unbound that ever happened, or, you know, talking about different technical sides of things. Our most recent one was about bike fits. So like, what should we be
That's a good
thinking
one.
about for these long events? And yeah, we're just trying to bring some levity to it all. And again, like, we can, as athletes, we get really obsessed with a lot of things. And so Nick and I, we try and take a step back and just say, you know, like, you know, let's have some fun with it all and talk about some gravel, and it gets us excited. So yeah, check us out.
Awesome. And then you also coach. So if people are interested, they're like, maybe I want to coach or something. Where can they find you? Where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, best place is website, ramblercoaching.com. So check that out. And again, I'm on all the social stuff out there. So reach out in any way that is best for you. I love answering questions. And even if it's just, you know, asking, if you're not interested in coaching, but you just want to ask a question or something, I love helping in that way as well. So be sure to do that.
Cool. And we're working potentially with a brand to have a little More Women, More Miles party at Unbound. So we hope that you will be able to join us for that, Kristen, and meet everybody face to face.
Yeah, that'd be really fun. Excited about that.
So, Libby, put the spelling.
Yeah. Yes. It's a little bit of a weird one. It's Rambler, Rambleur. It's a long story that we won't get into, but it's Rambler Coaching. And yeah.
Well, I just want to thank all of our partners that have made this happen. Unbound has come on as a sponsor because they believe in getting more women to the start line. And so we want to thank them. Tactic Fitness and Nutrition. You're going to hear more from Meredith, who is one of the co-owners of that, when we talk about nutrition, and a little bit next week with indoor training. We have Hannah Otto and Meredith Root next week. It's going to be really great on indoor training. And then, of course, Feisty Media, who's the parent company of Girls Gone Gravel. And thank you all so much for joining us today, that joined us live. And for those of you that are listening on the podcast, if you go to the Unbound website, you'll be able to find those training plans. And we will put the links to how to find Kristen in the show notes. So really appreciate everybody being here today.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Good luck this year.